Congratulations.
Thank
I
you.
watched the film yesterday, and it's stunning.
Thank you.
Tell us what it's about.
Well, the film is inspired by a painting. It's a painting of a young mixed-race woman called Dido Elizabeth Bell and her white cousin, Elizabeth Murray. And the two women are shown in this portrait, which is commissioned by their uncle, Lord Mansfield, and who has adopted them both and raised them as sisters. Here in Kenwood House, and he's raised both women as equals and both as aristocrats.
We should prepare some extra beds in case our visitors are to stay.
May we wear the new silk?
I will do your hairbed. Oh, say we may wear them, Aunt Mary.
You will not be dining with us, Dido.
The interesting thing about the movie is that Lord Mansfield is, in fact, the Lord Chief Justice of England. He's the highest judge in the land, and while he's raising this young woman, he's also presiding over what became a very important Supreme Court appeal case.
Your ruling could bring the slave trade to its knees. Is that pressure not maddening, my lord?
Let justice be done, though the heavens may fall.
In the story, we've decided to paint Dido as a woman who is an heiress, and therefore she becomes, in many ways, a sort of prize, a trophy. The kind of wife you would want to solidify your status.
May I present the second of my two nieces, Miss Dido Lindsay?
I find her repulsive.
I had no idea she'd be so black.
One does not make a wife of the rare and exotic.
The thing for me watching it was that it felt very contemporary. Is that what you intended?
The draw of telling a story like this is the contemporary resonance, basically. You know, we have different gender issues today, but the gender issues in the story still speak to issues that we have today. We have some different race issues today, but the race issues in the story still speak to race issues of today. This isn't literally, it isn't, and pardon the pun, a black and white issue. Issues of status, race, class, gender, value, identity, they all overlap with each other. And I was desperate to tell a complex story about all of this, not something that was simple in many ways. And on the surface, it's a love story and it seems very simple, but in many ways, it's complex. It has real nuance that I think speaks to some of the subtle issues that we're dealing with today.
How much of your life is in it?
A lot. A lot. I mean, people talk about the language and speak about how bold the language is, but I use language that came out of my own life. There's a particular scene in which they're looking at the very young Dido and the family are discussing whether or not they can take her in and how it will look to society. And, you know, they describe her as black and she's just a little girl and they describe her almost as if she's an object.
That is simply impossible.
What is right can never be impossible.
What has she been named?
Dido Bell Lindsay.
She takes your name.
I am not ashamed.
And I remember being described in that way. Certainly, the character of Lord Mansfield is very heavily based on my father, who died during the making of the movie. Lord Mansfield is a man who's very much a man of his time. He's about the rules. He's about a sense of the today then, but he's also got another foot very firmly in being a progressive man, a man ahead of his time, and that creates a conflict in him.
You don't live in Britain right now, do you?
Right now I live in Holland, yes.
But I mean, you know, obviously racism and xenophobia is a growing issue right now, politically.
Absolutely.
And across, you know, not just in Britain, but across Europe.
It is.
I mean, I wonder what your thoughts are.
I'm very disturbed by it, obviously. I live in The Hague, and The Hague is a very grown-up city, and yet, walking through the streets, we still experience, my husband and I, that discrimination that in some ways I felt takes me back to an England some 25 years ago.
Do you feel it's getting worse?
I do feel it's getting worse in some ways. In many ways, we're doing well, I think. But I think in other ways we are struggling, and this is the stuff that I want to speak to in the movies that I make and the stories that I tell.
And what about the film industry? I mean, do you feel you're up against prejudice there as well?
I think there are times when I have been up against prejudice, and I think that there's definitely an issue that I'm not the shape or the colour that a film director usually comes in. And you know, I definitely, both as a woman and as a black filmmaker, you know, sort of feel that tension sometimes. But having said that, there are an awful lot of people in the film industry today who look at me for what I can do.
You'll have seen Lenny Henry's thoughts on television.
I have.
Do you think they make sense, and do you think something similar should happen in film?
I totally agree with all of it. I think it's very important because of the success of Steve McQueen abroad and 12 Years a Slave and other people, Idris Elba and so many other people that are going abroad and having their talent recognised. I think it's putting the UK on a spot and in a spot, and I think that it's going to be very, very difficult to ignore the diversity of talent that exists out there in the way that previously we have done. And I think we as people of colour are tired. We know we're talented. We don't want to be politicians. We don't want to fight those battles. We want to create. And I think the time for talking has now stopped and it's time for action. I don't want to be the only one who walks through the door. I want to really hold that door open for generations behind me to come through. And as my school colleague Kwame Amar says, he doesn't want to be having this conversation with his children's children. And neither do I.